Welcome to War Bios, the podcast where we delve into the most pivotal battles in history, examining the strategic context, operational art, and human cost of conflict. I'm your host, General Biography, and today we're going to explore one of the most fascinating and complex battles of World War I, the Battle of Cambrai. In November 1917, the British Army launched a surprise attack on the German lines near the town of Cambrai, situated in the Nord-Pas-de-Calais region of northern France. This battle was not an isolated event, but rather the culmination of months of planning and preparation by both sides. To understand the significance of the Battle of Cambrai, we must first examine its origins, which date back to the early years of World War I. The town of Cambrai, with its strategic location near the Canal du Nord and the Saint-Quentin Canal, had been a crucial hub for the German army since the beginning of the war. The Germans had heavily fortified the area, constructing a complex network of trenches, bunkers, and barbed wire entanglements to protect their positions. As the war dragged on, the British Army began to look for ways to break through the German defenses and restore mobility to the battlefield. One key figure who played a significant role in the development of the Battle of Cambrai was General Julian Byng, the commander of the British Third Army. Byng was a proponent of using tanks to break through the German lines, and he had been experimenting with these new machines since their introduction at the Battle of Flers-Courcelette in September 1916. Despite initial setbacks and technical difficulties, Byng remained convinced that tanks held the key to unlocking the German defenses. As the summer of 1917 drew to a close, the British Army began to assemble its forces in preparation for a major assault on the German lines. The plan, codenamed Operation Golf, called for a massive tank-led attack on the German positions near Cambrai, with the aim of breaking through the defenses and creating a gap for the infantry to pour through. The British Army spent weeks gathering intelligence on the German dispositions, using aerial reconnaissance and spies to identify weaknesses in the enemy's lines. Meanwhile, the Germans were not idle. They had been developing their own countermeasures to deal with the British tank threat, including the creation of special anti-tank units equipped with massive cannons and armor-piercing projectiles. These units, known as Panzerjäger, were designed to knock out the British tanks before they could reach the German lines. As the autumn of 1917 wore on, the tension in the air grew thicker. The British soldiers waited anxiously for the order to advance, their nerves stretched taut by the knowledge that they were about to embark on one of the most audacious and innovative battles of the war. And so, we find ourselves on the cusp of this pivotal moment as the British Army prepares to launch its surprise attack on the German lines. The fate of the war hangs in the balance, and the outcome of the Battle of Cambrai will have far-reaching consequences for both sides. The morning of November 20, 1917, marked the beginning of the Battle of Cambrai, with a massive artillery bombardment that shook the very foundations of the earth. The British guns unleashed a torrent of fire upon the German positions, aiming to weaken their defenses and create an opening for the tanks to break through. As the barrage lifted, the British tanks, 476 in total, began their advance, rumbling forward like mechanical beasts across the muddy terrain. The initial progress was nothing short of spectacular. The tanks, supported by infantry and aircraft, tore through the German lines with relative ease, creating a gap that seemed to promise a decisive victory. The town of Cambrai itself was soon within reach, and the British commanders held high hopes of capturing it quickly. However, as the day wore on, the Germans began to regroup and counterattack. The German anti-tank units, those specialized Panzerjäger we mentioned earlier, proved particularly effective against the British tanks. Armed with massive cannons and armor-piercing projectiles, these units picked off the tanks one by one, gradually whittling down their numbers. The muddy terrain also began to take its toll on the British machines, as many became bogged down or broke down under the strain. Despite these setbacks, the British continued to push forward, driven by a determination to break through the German defenses once and for all. On November 21, they achieved a significant milestone, capturing the village of Fontaine-Notre-Dame and pushing deep into the German rear. However, this success came at a high cost in terms of men and machines. As the battle raged on, both sides suffered heavy casualties. The British lost over 40,000 men during the first few days of fighting, while the Germans also suffered significant losses. The fighting was intense and brutal, with soldiers on both sides displaying remarkable courage and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. One notable example of this bravery was the action of Lieutenant Colonel John Campbell, who led his battalion of the Royal Tank Regiment into the heart of the German defenses. Despite being vastly outnumbered and outgunned, Campbell's men fought valiantly, holding off repeated counterattacks and securing a vital bridgehead for the British forces. The use of tanks as a primary assault force marked a significant shift away from traditional infantry tactics, paving the way for future armored conflicts. The bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers who fought at Cambrai also serve as a poignant reminder of the human cost of war. And so, we find ourselves at a turning point in our narrative as the Battle of Cambrai reaches its climax. The outcome is far from certain, with both sides exhausted and depleted after days of intense fighting. The final stages of the Battle of Cambrai saw a series of counterattacks by the German army, which had regrouped and reinforced its positions after the initial shock of the British tank assault. By November 30, 1917, the Germans had managed to push the British back from many of the gains they had made in the early days of the battle, including the village of Fontaine, Notre Dame. This counterattack was marked by fierce fighting and significant losses on both sides, underscoring the brutal nature of trench warfare. The aftermath of the Battle of Cambrai was characterized by a mix of disappointment and reflection for the British. Despite the initial promise of a breakthrough, the battle ultimately ended in a stalemate, with neither side able to achieve a decisive victory. The British had suffered over 40,000 casualties, including nearly 9,000 men taken prisoner by the Germans. The loss was keenly felt, especially considering the high hopes that had been pinned on the tank assault as a way to break the deadlock of trench warfare. For the Germans, the outcome of the Battle of Cambrai was seen as a defensive victory, having repelled a major British offensive and maintained their hold on the strategic terrain. However, the cost had been high, with estimates suggesting that German casualties were not far behind those of the British. The battle also highlighted the vulnerability of static defenses to armored assaults, prompting the Germans to reevaluate their defensive strategies. The Battle of Cambrai marked a significant turning point in the development of armored warfare. The employment of tanks as a primary assault force had shown promise, but also exposed the limitations and vulnerabilities of these early machines. The lessons learned at Cambrai would influence the development of tank doctrine and technology, paving the way for future armored conflicts. In the broader context of World War I, the Battle of Cambrai was part of a series of attempts by both the Allies and the Central Powers to break the stalemate of the Western Front. While it did not achieve its strategic objectives, it contributed to the ongoing evolution of military tactics and technology that would shape the final years of the war. Today, the legacy of the Battle of Cambrai is remembered for its innovation in warfare and the bravery of those who fought. The battlefields around Cambrai are dotted with memorials and cemeteries, serving as poignant reminders of the human cost of conflict. And so, our journey through the Battle of Cambrai comes to a close. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most fascinating and complex battles of World War I. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.